My name is Dr. Aubrey de Grey. I'm the Chief Science Officer of SENS Research Foundation, which is a biomedical research charity based in Silicon Valley. And we work on the early stage development of new medicines that seek to rejuvenate people. In other words, to repair and eliminate the molecular and cellular damage of aging and thereby restore the elderly to a youthful level of physical and mental function. COVID-19 is certainly exacerbated by close contact, but close contact is by no means a phenomenon of the modern world. Indeed, cities and the large high-density populations that have been the major foci of the spread of COVID-19 are a phenomenon that is almost as old as civilization itself. So I think it would be extremely controversial to make a linkage between global overpopulation and the spread of the virus. There is likely to be a much greater level of maturity in the analysis of how the world works together, whether it's at the level of population or travel or other ways in which infections are transmitted. This, of course, extends also to research. But I think that the main aspect of that we need to focus on is that we should not be looking at global population in isolation. We need to look at it as not something that is a problem, but rather as something that fits together with all of the things that people do. And of course, the biggest one of all when we talk about overpopulation is pollution, which, the burning of fossil fuels is what causes climate change and so on. So the big mistake that people have historically made of viewing overpopulation as a problem in its own right is likely, I believe, to be treated in a much more nuanced way going forward. I certainly think that one silver lining of the pandemic will be that people will have become much better at working remotely. However, the fact is that a large proportion of the activities that people engage in, both for work and for leisure, do involve close personal interaction. So it seems very clear to me that going forward, the greater consciousness of the risk of transmission of infections will lead not just to people seeing less of each other, but rather to measures which simply limit the spread of infections, including much more comprehensive and frequent testing, and also, of course, contact tracing. If we ask what has failed us here, what could have been done in the past that would have saved lives right now, then the answer does not come down to the use of technology. It comes down to the development of technology and the use of measures that are not technological. So, for example, we could have put a lot more money into the infrastructure to develop neutralizing antibodies for new diseases. It's all very well having technology that sequences a new virus in 10 minutes, but that's not much use if it takes 18 months to generate antibodies. And I am sure that that process could have been speeded up by a factor of several anyway, simply by throwing more money at the infrastructure and machinery that's involved in turning a new virus into an antibody, developing an antibody for a new virus. The main thing that occurs to me in response to that question is the greater acknowledgement that old people are people too. At the moment, obviously, we are seeing that the vulnerability of the elderly to COVID-19 is particularly extreme. Of course, typical seasonal flu affects the elderly more than it affects the young, but the disparity is much greater in the case of COVID-19. And yet, we are seeing that around the world, societies are being remarkably compliant with extreme sacrifices that are having to be made in order to limit the spread of this virus. This, I believe, is a message, a strong message to decision makers and policymakers around the world that says that actually there are votes in this, in actually doing something to maintain the health of the elderly. Historically, I believe that policymakers and decision makers have not taken that view. They have taken the view that the elderly, well, they don't complain very much. Maybe we should just ignore them, really. And therefore, there has been an inadequate prioritization of medical research and medical provision for the elderly. That may change now as a result of the fact that the younger population, the working population, have shown with their actions that actually they care about the elderly.